Hey there, sleepyhead, I'm so glad you're here. This is the perfect moment to slow down and simply listen. Before we begin, don't forget to tap like and hit subscribe so we can share more quiet nights together. And leave a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there?
I've been a corporate travel consultant for 10 years. Hotels, resorts, short-term rentals. I've arranged accommodations for hundreds of clients across America. I thought I'd seen it all. I thought nothing could scare me anymore. I was trained to be systematic, logical, always thinking 3 steps ahead. I was wrong. November night in Montana changed everything. Even now, years later, when I open the Airbnb app, my palms start to sweat. It started with a simple job. I was managing a conference for a client in Missoula, Montana. Normally I'd book a hotel, but that year the budget was tight, so I thought, why not find a quiet, isolated cabin on Airbnb? Save some money, get some peace and quiet away from the city noise. Was scrolling through listings when one caught my eye. Rustic cabin. Retreat, 15 miles outside Missoula, surrounded by dense forest. The first photo mesmerized me. A small wooden cabin nestled between towering evergreens, firelight glowing. Through the windows, snow on the roof, a quiet porch facing the woods. The host's profile showed Michael, 52, retired handyman, 4.89 rating, 156 reviews. Every review was glowing, cozy place, perfect getaway, host very responsive, beautiful views. Perfect, I thought. I booked it immediately. But right after booking, something odd happened. I sent Michael a standard message. Hi Michael, I'm arriving on November 10th, around 8 p.m. Could you confirm the check-in process? 90 minutes later, his reply came through. It was minimal. Oddly minimal. Okay. Door code is 5847. No need to call, just enter. Questions? That struck me as strange. In my 10 years, I've received hundreds of Airbnb host messages. They're usually warm, detailed. You get Wi-Fi passwords, heating instructions, recommendations for local restaurants. But this was cold, transactional. And that phrase, no need to call. Why would a host specifically tell a guest not to contact them? Why would he prefer that I just enter the property without any communication? Read through the reviews again more carefully. Most were still positive, but I noticed a pattern I'd missed before. Several guests wrote things like, lovely place to be alone, host doesn't bother you at all. Another, very private property. Michael respects your space. People meant it as a compliment, but the more I read, the more it felt like a warning. Still, I rationalized it. A private host, isn't that what I wanted? A place to escape from work stress, away from people. Told myself everything was fine. Arrival, November 10th, evening. I landed in Missoula and picked up a rental car. The city was small, quiet, peaceful, but the drive to the cabin took me further and further away from civilization. The road twisted through dark mountain passes. Dense forest on both sides, no street lights, no other cars. Just my headlights cutting through the November darkness and the GPS voice guiding me deeper into the woods. By 7 p.m., I could barely see anything beyond the immediate trees. The cabin appeared suddenly, a dark shape against the black forest, with only a single porch light glowing. It looked exactly like the listing photos. Isolated, quiet, alone. Parked, grabbed my bag and walked to the door. The code worked. The door clicked open. Inside, I reached for the light switch, but before I flipped it, I noticed something. The fireplace had fresh ash in it. Someone had been here recently. Someone had just left. I turned on the lights. The cabin was laid out simply. A large main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, 2 bedrooms down a hallway. Everything was clean, but cold. No welcome note, no flowers, no Wi-Fi password written on the counter. Just a bare, neat space that felt sterile. And then I saw it in the far corner. Mounted high on a wooden beam near the ceiling was a small black device. At first glance, it looked like a smoke detector, but I've spent enough time in corporate spaces to recognize surveillance equipment when I see it. The angle was wrong for a smoke detector. It was pointing directly at the main living area, toward the couch, toward the bedroom entrance. My heart rate spiked. I stood there for a long moment, staring at that device, trying to rationalize. Maybe it's actually a smoke detector. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe, but I knew better. Walked over to the coffee table and picked up a stack of papers, the house manual, I assumed. Inside was a printed list of rules. Standard stuff: please don't disturb firewood, Wi-Fi password, Missoula Forest 47, check out by 11 a.m. But at the bottom, in what looked like hastily scrawled handwriting, was a note: cameras in common areas for security. Your privacy in bedrooms is respected. Cameras, plural. My mouth went dry. I looked around the room again. Now that I knew what to look for, I could spot them. Another small device hidden in the corner of a bookshelf, pointing at the kitchen. A third one. Was that one too? Near. The hallway leading to the bedrooms, angled down the corridor. I grabbed my phone and opened the Airbnb listing again. I scrolled through all the photos, all 24 of them. In every single shot, these cameras were either out of frame or so cleverly hidden that I'd missed them the first time. The reviews suddenly made sense. That phrase repeated over and over: host doesn't bother you. Not because Michael was respectful, but because he didn't need to bother guests in person. He was watching them. I felt my chest tighten. My hands started to shake. Everything about this situation was wrong. The isolated location, the cold welcome, the minimal communication, the cameras hidden throughout the property. This wasn't a safety measure. This was surveillance. This was a trap set by someone who wanted to watch people in a place where no one could hear them scream. And I had just walked into it. I was standing alone, 15 miles from the nearest town, in a cabin owned by a man whose real intentions were now crystal clear. It was 7:15 p.m. The sun was already gone. The forest outside was pitch black. My phone had 1 bar of signal, and I had just realized that I wasn't alone in this cabin. Someone was watching. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I stood in the center of that cabin, turning slowly in a circle, staring at each hidden camera. 1, 2, 3, and possibly more that I couldn't spot in the dim light. Think. Think clearly. You're a professional. You solve problems for a living. But this wasn't a scheduling conflict or a hotel overbooking. This was a violation. This was a predator's lair. I pulled up my phone to call the police, but I stopped myself. If Michael was monitoring the cameras, and he almost certainly was, he'd know immediately that I'd discovered them. What would he do then? Would he try to keep me here? Would he show up? My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. I needed to think like an investigator, not a victim. I needed evidence. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I involved the authorities. I moved carefully through the cabin, photographing each camera. My hands were still trembling, but I forced myself to stay methodical. Close-up shots of the device on the beam, the one in the bookshelf, the one angled down the hallway. I made sure to capture the serial numbers, the angles, everything. Then I checked the house manual again. That printed note about cameras for security. Was that legally required disclosure? In Montana, homeowners are supposed to inform guests about surveillance in common areas, but the way this was written, buried in fine print, seemed deliberately obscure. Most people wouldn't even notice it. Most people wouldn't think to look. I opened the Airbnb app again and scrolled through Michael's reviews one more time. This time, I read them differently. I was looking for subtle warnings for people who'd caught on. And then I found it. A review from 8 months ago from a woman named Sarah M. She'd left 3 stars instead of 5, unusual for this property. Her comment was brief: pretty cabin, but something felt off. Wouldn't stay again. Below that review, Michael had responded, "Sorry you didn't feel comfortable. Not sure what was wrong. Hope your next stay is better." But there was something in the timestamp. Sarah had left that review, and within 24 hours, Michael had deleted all the detailed photos from his listing and re-uploaded new ones. I could tell by the metadata the new photos were dated the day after her review. He was covering his tracks. He'd realized someone had gotten suspicious, so he'd systematically removed and replaced every photo. It was careful, calculated, professional. This wasn't some sloppy amateur. This was someone who'd been doing this for a long time. I felt ice in my veins. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Everything okay? It was Michael. My breath caught. How did he? Then I realized. Of course, the cabin probably had Wi-Fi that logged device connections. Or maybe he'd seen my car arrive on some kind of security camera outside. Or maybe he was just checking in on a guest like a normal host would. Except nothing about this was normal. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I should have done the moment I walked in. I went directly to the bedroom and started packing my bag. My hands were moving on pure adrenaline now. Shove clothes in the bag, grab the charger, don't forget your ID, move, move, move. Another text came through, saw your car, wanted to make sure you got in okay. No issues? The casualness of it made my skin crawl, the friendly tone, the concerned host checking on his guest, a perfect cover for a predator. I didn't reply. Instead, I texted a friend back home. If you don't hear from me in 24 hours, I'm at cabin address. Call police. I included the Airbnb listing URL. Then I grabbed my bag, walked to the door, and stopped. The door code to get in had worked fine. But what if Michael had changed the exit code? What if he'd locked it remotely? What if I tried the handle? It turned freely. The door opened. Cold November air hit my face. The forest outside was completely black. No lights, no houses, no civilization, just darkness and trees and the sound of wind. I had maybe 15 miles to drive back to civilization. My phone had 1 bar of signal, and Michael now knew I was leaving. I got to my car and locked all the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I started the engine, turned on the headlights, and drove away from that cabin as fast as I safely could on that dark, winding mountain road. For the first 5 minutes, I checked my mirrors constantly, expecting to see headlights following me. But nothing appeared, just darkness behind me, darkness in front of me, and my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I finally saw lights, the first lights of the town ahead, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station and ran. Inside, the gas station attendant was an older man, maybe in his 60s. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "You okay, Honorable?" he asked. I wasn't. I was breathing too fast. My vision was starting to blur at the edges. I felt like I was about to pass out. "I need to call the police," I managed to say. "I need to report a crime or potential crime. I'm not sure." 15 minutes later, I was sitting in a Missoula Police Department interview room with Detective Sarah Chen. She was professional, calm, and immediately serious when I started describing what I'd found. Showed her the photographs I'd taken. I played her the text messages from Michael. I pulled up his Airbnb profile and walked her through the reviews, especially Sarah M's suspicious 3-star rating and Michael's immediate response of replacing all his photos. Detective Chen's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened as she listened. "You did the right thing leaving," she said quietly. "And you did the right thing coming here immediately. Has he tried to contact you again?" "No, nothing since I got in the car." She made a note. "We're going to take this very seriously. The cameras you described, if they're pointed at common areas and he disclosed them, that's technically legal in Montana. But if they're pointed into bedrooms or bathrooms, that's a felony. Hidden cameras, period, without disclosure, is definitely a crime." "There was a disclosure," I said, "buried in the house manual. 1 sentence. I almost didn't see it." Detective Chen nodded. "We'll need to get a warrant to search the property and seize the equipment. In the meantime, I'm going to pull his rental history, his background, everything." Over the next 3 days, while I stayed in a hotel in Missoula, at the police department's recommendation, the investigation unfolded. Detective Chen called me on the 3rd day with updates. Michael, whose real name was Michael Garrett, not Michael the retired handyman, had been running that Airbnb for 4 years. He had 156 reviews, mostly 5 stars. He'd hosted over 200 guests, and he'd been recording them the entire time. When police executed the search warrant, they found computers, external hard drives, and 3 hidden cameras mounted throughout the cabin. They also found a 4th camera that I'd somehow missed, mounted inside, a hollowed-out book on a shelf pointed directly at the couch where, Guests would sit and relax completely unaware. But the worst part came when the police accessed his computers. Thousands of hours of footage. Video of guests in various states of undress. Video of couples in intimate moments. Video of solo travelers vulnerable and alone. Michael had been systematically recording guests for years, compiling a massive archive of invasive, deeply personal material. The police found evidence that he'd been selling selected clips to various dark websites. They found encrypted files containing organized collections, sorted by guest age, gender, activity. It was methodical, obsessive, evil. Michael was arrested within 48 hours before he could destroy evidence or flee. He's currently facing federal charges for voyeurism, invasion of privacy, distribution of intimate imagery without consent, and a dozen other counts. He's been denied bail. The DA is pushing for the maximum sentences available. But here's what haunts me most. I was one of 200+ guests who stayed in that cabin. 200 people who thought they were renting a cozy retreat, and instead they were being recorded without their knowledge or consent. Some of them were there with family. Some were there during their most private moments. Some, and this is what makes my blood run cold, might have been there without any choice at all if Michael had decided to escalate. From voyeurism to something worse, Sarah M., the woman who left the 3-star review, later contacted me through the police. She'd felt something was wrong, but she couldn't quite articulate it. She told me that if I hadn't booked that cabin and discovered the cameras, Michael might still be operating, might still be recording, might still be getting bolder. The police told me that Airbnb has been sued multiple times for failing to adequately vet hosts and failing to implement robust security measures. They've settled billions in claims, but the company keeps operating under the same basic model: trust the host, trust the system, assume good faith, and predators know this. They exploit it. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't what happened to me. It's the knowledge of what could have happened. It's the realization that my discovery was partly luck. I happened to be trained to notice surveillance equipment. Many guests would never have spotted those cameras. Many guests would have spent the entire night being recorded without ever knowing. And it's the knowledge that Michael wasn't unique. Across the country, on Airbnb, VRBO, and other platforms, there are hosts running similar operations. Not all of them have been caught. Some probably never will be. Every time I see an Airbnb listing now, I think about those cameras. I think about what might be hidden behind the cheerful photos and the glowing reviews. I think about all the people checking in tonight to properties where they think they're safe, but they're not. They're being watched. And I think about the fact that Michael's profile, even now, could be recreated by someone new. There's nothing to stop him. Airbnb's verification process isn't rigorous enough. Their disclosure requirements are easily buried. Their response time to complaints is slow. Last month, I got a call from a lawyer. She's representing 15 guests who filed a civil lawsuit against Airbnb for negligence. She wanted me to be a witness. I said yes immediately. Because here's what I know for certain. I was lucky. Incredibly, impossibly lucky. But luck isn't a security system. Luck isn't a protection. And somewhere tonight, someone is booking an Airbnb that looks beautiful in the photos, has great reviews, and feels like a safe haven. They have no idea what's waiting for them, and the cameras are already rolling. Story 2. I've spent 12 years in law enforcement, working everything from petty theft to homicide in 3 different states. I've walked into blood-soaked living rooms, crash sites, and crime scenes that would keep most people awake for months. I honestly believe nothing could shake me anymore until the night I booked an Airbnb for myself and realized, too late, that I had just walked into someone else's hunting ground. It was supposed to be a break. That's the part that still bothers me the most. I wasn't on duty. I wasn't following a lead. I wasn't shadowing a suspect. I was just a burned-out detective from Phoenix trying to get 2 quiet nights away from paperwork and court dates. Picked Utah because it felt far enough to be away but close enough to drive. Southern Utah has these beautiful red rock deserts and long stretches of empty highway. A colleague had told me, if you ever want to actually hear yourself think, go there. So I decided to book a small house just off a highway outside a town called Green River. I didn't pick it at random. I treated it like I would a hotel for a witness or a visiting agent. Cross-checked reviews, looked for consistent patterns, checked the host's profile. The listing was called Highway Oasis, private desert house, easy access, I-70. The pictures showed a small single-story house sitting alone in the flat desert, with nothing but scrub and distant mesas all around. At night, the sky in the photos was full of stars. The host's name was Eric, no last name, but on Airbnb that wasn't unusual. He had a 4.9 rating, 80-something reviews. People called the place perfect overnight stop between Denver and Vegas. Quiet, easy check-in, right off the freeway. Felt safe traveling alone. That last line hooked me. Felt safe traveling alone. Whoever wrote that was exactly the kind of person predators look for. Solo travelers passing through, no local ties. But the review sounded genuinely relieved, not sarcastic. The description said, self-check-in, lockbox on door, no interaction needed. I respect guests' privacy. House is basic but clean. Basic, but clean was enough. It was cheap too, cheaper than the chain motels right off the interstate. I figured, worst case, I'm in a slightly run-down desert house for 2 nights. I've stayed in worse places on surveillance. I booked it for Friday and Saturday. Driving up from Arizona, the scenery slowly emptied out. By late afternoon, I was on I-70, passing fewer and fewer cars. The sun was sinking behind the red cliffs, throwing long shadows across the asphalt. That particular stretch of highway feels like you're driving on the bottom of a drained ocean, wide, flat, and eerily quiet. The directions said to take an exit, then follow a frontage road that ran parallel to the highway for about 3 miles, then turn off onto a dirt driveway. I remember slowing down as my GPS told me to exit. There were no lights, no gas stations, nothing but a rusted sign half fallen over that marked the old road. The frontage road itself was barely lit by my headlights. On one side, the interstate roared in the distance, just a low, constant hum of semis and the occasional car. On the other side was pure black desert. No houses, no billboards, no signs of life. Just scrub brush and open land stretching out under a darkening sky. Found the dirt driveway by the reflector marker Eric had mentioned. In the listing, a faded strip of reflective tape on a wooden post. If I hadn't been looking for it, I would have blown right past. I turned in. The gravel crunched under my tires. After a few seconds, my headlights picked up the outline of the house. It was exactly like the photos, a small rectangular building with a low roof, a front porch, and a single light over the door. No neighboring structures, no other driveways, just that one lonely house sitting in a sea of darkness. I parked in front and shut off the engine. The sudden silence was physical. I could still hear the highway, but now it was faint, like a distant ocean. The air was cold, dry, and carried a faint smell of dust and fuel. For a moment, I just sat there, letting my eyes adjust, listening. It's an old habit. Arrive, pause, observe. No movement, no voices, no music, just wind scraping along the side of the house. I got out, grabbed my overnight bag, and walked up to the front door. The lockbox was exactly where the listing said it would be, screwed into the wall beside the frame. I punched in the 4-digit code I'd gotten in my Airbnb inbox that morning. The box opened with a stiff click. The key was inside. So far, so normal. I unlocked the door, stepped in, and felt for the light switch with my left hand. The interior lights flickered on, pale and slightly yellow. The place was sparse but clean. Small living room with a couch and a coffee table. A kitchenette, a short hallway leading to what I assumed were the bedroom and bathroom. Beige walls, linoleum floor, no decoration except a generic canvas print of some canyon. It looked exactly like it did in the photos, and yet something felt off. The first thing that hit me was the temperature. The air inside was just a shade warmer than outside, but not by much. If no one had been here for a while, the house should have been colder this deep into the desert night. The heater must have kicked on recently. The second thing was the smell. It wasn't bad, it just smelled lived in, not like stale vacancy, not like cleaner or dust. More like someone had been here the day before, a faint trace of deodorant, a hint of cigarette smoke that someone had tried to cover with cheap air freshener. I moved through the living room, my cop brain automatically scanning for details. The coffee table had faint ring marks from cups, not unusual. The couch cushion was slightly indented on one side, as if someone had been sitting there recently. A thin layer of fine dust lay on the TV stand, except for a clean disturbance. Right in front of the TV, like someone had wiped a small area with their hand. In the kitchen, a single plate sat in the drying rack next to the sink, along with one mug and one fork. Airbnb hosts sometimes do that, leave a dish or two visible so guests know the kitchen's usable, but the mug had a faint coffee ring still clinging to the inside. It looked more like somebody had used it that morning and never put it away. I told myself it was probably just the cleaner or Eric himself passing through. Rural hosts sometimes use their properties between guests. Still, the back of my neck prickled a little. I checked my phone. 1 bar of service. Wi-Fi network popped up. Highway Oasis guest. No password required. That was odd, but not unheard of. Some hosts leave it open. I almost connected automatically, then stopped. An open, unsecured network in the middle of nowhere with a host I didn't know in a house that already felt slightly wrong? No. I set the phone down on the counter instead. I walked down the short hallway, flipped on the bedroom light, a neatly made queen-size bed, 2 nightstands, a narrow dresser. Again, exactly like the photos. The closet door was closed. I opened it, empty hangers, an extra blanket, nothing else. I checked the bathroom, standard setup. A couple of small hotel-style toiletries, clean towels, a faint whiff of bleach. On the surface, everything was fine, and yet, my heart wouldn't slow down. Years on the job had taught me to pay attention when my body noticed something my conscious mind couldn't explain yet. Went back into the living room and stood still, in the center of the rug, and just listened. The highway hum, the wind outside, the faint buzz of the fridge. And then I heard it, so soft I almost missed it. A distant, barely audible click from somewhere in the house. Not like pipes, not like settling wood, more like the sound of a relay switching, an electrical relay. I slowly turned my head toward the corner of the living room, above and slightly behind the TV. There, near the ceiling, was a small dark dome mounted on the wall. The listing had not shown this angle. From below, it could have been a motion detector or part of a security system. A small black half-sphere with a smoked plastic cover facing down into the room. I took a step closer, squinting, my heartbeat starting to pound a little harder in my ears. There was no alarm keypad by the door. No security sign in the yard. Most people who install motion detectors also install signs, more for show than anything. But there was nothing. Just that half-sphere, angled perfectly to cover the entire living room and front entry. Come on, I muttered to myself. You're tired. Not every device is a threat. But my feet were already moving, carrying me to the opposite corner of the room. From that angle, I caught the faintest glint of glass behind the smoked cover. A lens. My mouth went dry. I looked around slowly, more carefully this time. There, near the hallway, fixed up where the wall met the ceiling, was another small dome. Opposite it, in the corner by the kitchen, was a third, 3 devices. All oriented toward the interior, not toward the doors or windows. Security systems are designed to catch intruders. These devices, however, had their backs to every possible entry point, and their eyes turned inward, watching the people already inside. Felt my chest tighten, that familiar surge of adrenaline skating under my skin. Reminded myself that some landlords install cameras in common areas to monitor for break-ins or protect the property. It's creepy, but not always illegal, especially if they claim to disclose it somewhere in the listing. I pulled out my phone and opened the Airbnb app again. I scrolled down to the Things to Know section, reading line by line. House rules, quiet hours, no parties, no pets, no mention of cameras. I scrolled back up, checking the listing photos again. The living room shots were angled just low enough that you'd never see the ceiling. The one single photo taken from the hallway into the living room cut off the exact corners where those domes were mounted. That was not an accident. My heart was beating a little faster now, each thud sharp and loud. I opened the message thread with Eric. His last message sent that morning read, "Key is in lockbox code 400732. No need to meet in person. Make yourself at home." No need to meet in person. I set the phone slowly back down on the counter, that uneasy feeling settling into something colder. Through the thin walls, I could hear the faint rush of highway traffic. Out here, alone in that bland little house, with open desert on all sides and cheap, anonymous dome cameras watching the inside, the sound didn't comfort me. It reminded me how far away help really was, and how easy it would be for something, Bad to happen to a traveler here, someone just passing through like me, and 4, it to be blamed on the highway, or a random drifter, or simple bad luck. It was only then, standing in the middle of the living room with 3 black domes staring down at me, that I realized something very simple, very chilling. If those cameras were live, someone already knew I was here. Someone was already watching. I dropped my bag onto the couch but didn't sit down. My brain was already running through checklists, routes out, points of entry, what could be used as a weapon if it came to that. Old instincts, kicking in whether I wanted them or not. Stepped directly underneath the dome above the TV and looked up. From that angle I could see more of the lens, just a hint of the glass curve behind the tinted plastic. No blinking light, no visible wires. That didn't make me feel better. Snapped a photo with my phone, then one of the dome near the hallway and the one by the kitchen. I zoomed in on each shot. Definitely cameras, not motion sensors. Too much hardware behind the cover, too precisely angled. I opened the kitchen drawer nearest the fridge. Mismatched silverware, a corkscrew, a cheap serrated knife, a roll of takeout menus. Nothing unusual. The drawer next to it held a flashlight, duct tape, and a pack of AA batteries. I stared at the duct tape a little too long. It was a normal thing to keep in a drawer, but I'd seen enough scenes where duct tape meant something very different. Stop. It, I muttered to myself. You're catastrophizing. But even as I said it, my own training argued back. Cameras aimed inward, no disclosure, isolated property. Easy highway access, a host who prefers no interaction, an unsecured Wi-Fi network. None of these things alone proved anything. Taken together, they started to look like a pattern. My phone buzzed in my hand. A new Airbnb message from Eric. Hey, just checking in. Make it to the house, okay? I stared at the text, suddenly hyper-aware of the 3 domes watching the room. Most good hosts send a similar message. That's what made it unnerving. On the surface, it was perfectly normal, but the timing, coming right after I'd walked the property and stood looking up at his cameras, it felt surgical. I typed back, yeah, all good, just arrived. Thanks. I hesitated, then added, is there a security system I should know about? Noticed some devices in the living room. I sent it. The reply came faster than I liked. Oh, yeah, just basic cameras in common areas, for break-ins and liability, nothing in bedrooms or bathrooms. Totally standard these days. Nobody watches live, just cloud storage. Don't worry, the little smiley face at the end made my skin crawl. He hadn't mentioned cameras in the listing. No photo, no security devices on property box checked, no line in things to know. Only when directly confronted did he casually acknowledge them, after the fact. Once I was already here, door locked behind me, night fully down outside. New Airbnb's policy. Hosts are supposed to disclose any cameras on the property, even in common areas. No hidden cameras, no recording in sleeping spaces or bathrooms, ever. I'd seen enough civil suits to know how this could play out if someone decided to push it. But that wasn't what was bothering me. What bothered me was that I couldn't see any obvious recording hardware. No little NVR box, no tangle of cables, no router with a brand sticker, just the open Wi-Fi network and 3 silent domes. If they were truly cloud-based, that meant someone, somewhere, could be watching from a laptop or a phone right now. And then another thought hit me. If I were the kind of person who used an isolated Airbnb as a lure, for robbery, for assault, for something worse, having live video of the inside would be incredibly useful. I'd know when a guest arrived, how many people were with them, where they put their bags, when they fell asleep. I'd know exactly when to come to the door. My heartbeat kicked up another notch. I walked over to the front door and checked the deadbolt. It turned smoothly. No extra interior slide lock, no chain, nothing that would give me an advantage if someone wanted to come in with a key. I checked the back door. There wasn't one. Just a small window over the kitchen sink, painted shut. Found my car keys in my jacket pocket and slid them into my jeans. I didn't take them out again. I had 2 options. Stay the night, hope this was just a creepy but ultimately harmless paranoid host setup, or leave, in the dark, back to the highway, and find a motel in town with a half-broken ice machine and fluorescent lighting. Every case I'd ever worked, every file I'd ever read about travelers who went missing between cities lined up in my head. I'd seen too many families in too many waiting rooms saying the same thing. They only stopped for the night. I decided I wasn't going to be one of those stories. I picked up my bag from the couch, slung it over my shoulder, and headed for the bedroom to grab my toiletry kit from the bathroom. I was halfway down the hall when something made me stop. It wasn't a sound. It was the absence of one. The faint hum of the fridge had stopped. The heater fan had cut out. In the sudden stillness, I heard a much softer noise, a faint crunch, of gravel outside, near the front of the house. My blood ran cold. I stepped backward into the shadow of the hallway, where I could see a sliver of the living room window, but couldn't easily be seen from outside. Old habits took over completely now. My breathing slowed, even as my pulse hammered. I shifted my weight onto the balls of my feet. Another crunch, closer this time. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be especially quiet. Headlights didn't wash across the window. Whoever was outside had parked without pulling up to the house, or maybe they'd walked from the road. Either possibility was bad. The front doorknob rattled gently. Just once, a test, not a knock. Slipped my hand into my bag and found the cold metal of my off-duty pistol. I hadn't planned on needing it on a solo decompression trip, but habit kept it with me. Right then, it felt less like paranoia and more like survival. The knob rattled again, a little harder. Heard a man's voice through the thin door, muffled but clear enough. "Hey. There, it's Eric. Just wanted to make sure you got in okay. Cell service is spotty out here." My stomach tightened into a knot. An ordinary guest would probably feel relieved. Nice host, checking in. But I knew how long ago I'd messaged him. I knew how quickly he'd replied. And I knew there was absolutely no reasonable explanation for him to show up in person, unannounced at my door, after explicitly saying we would not need to meet. Stayed silent. He knocked this time, 3 light taps. "I saw your car from the road," he called. "Thought I'd swing by, see if you needed anything." Saw my car from the road. That meant either he'd been driving by coincidentally, which I didn't buy, or he'd been close enough, long enough to be watching the property. He waited. The house felt smaller by the second, the weight of the cameras pressed down from the ceiling. I imagined him standing just outside, framed perfectly in the fisheye view, watching himself on his own phone. After a few moments, his tone shifted. Just slightly. "Sometimes the door sticks," he said. "If you're having trouble, I can just let myself in and show you how it works." He wasn't yelling. He didn't sound angry. But underneath the friendly host cadence, there was something else, an assumption, a quiet confidence that this was his space, not mine. My mind flicked through a half dozen. Headlines about hosts walking in on guests in the middle of the night, by accident. About thefts blamed on previous renters. About assaults that Airbnb settled quietly out of court. Made a decision. Stepped forward just enough to be seen if someone was looking through the peephole. I kept my gun low, out of sight but ready. "Eric," I said loud enough to carry through the door, my voice flat and professional. "This is Officer Daniel Cole, Phoenix PD. I'm off duty, but I'm still law enforcement. I'm not comfortable with unannounced visits or undisclosed cameras. I'm leaving the property tonight. Do not attempt to enter this house while I'm in it." There was a pause, a long one. When he answered, his voice had lost its syrupy warmth. "Cameras are legal in living rooms," he said. "It's all in the fine print, and this is my property." I felt a strange calm settle over me, the same one that used to hit right before going through a door on a warrant. "Your property," I said, "is currently hosting a law enforcement officer who has photo documentation of undisclosed surveillance equipment and a saved record of you telling guests there's no need to meet in person. I'm giving you a chance to walk away from this porch. Right now. Do not come back tonight." Silence. Again. 10 seconds. 15. Then I heard the crunch of gravel retreating. I waited by the door, motionless, for a full minute. Then another. I edged toward the side window, and from the corner, peeked out just enough to see the driveway. The dark-colored pickup truck sat about 30 yards down, pointed back toward the frontage road. No headlights. Driver's side door slightly ajar. As I watched, the door closed quietly. The engine turned over, lights still off, and the truck rolled away toward the road before the headlights finally clicked on, pointed away from the house. Only when the glow disappeared completely did I let myself exhale. I didn't bother packing neatly. I grabbed my bag from the hallway, swept my toiletry kit off the bathroom counter, pocketed the car charger from the wall. Then I took one last slow look around the living room, the anonymous furniture, the generic artwork, the silent camera domes staring down. Raised my phone and took one more picture, this time of the entire room. Guest bag on the floor, couch, TV, domes, a record of how it looked right before I left. Then I unlocked the front door, stepped out into the cold desert air, locked it, again behind me, and walked straight to my car without looking back. The drive back to the highway felt like it took hours. My body was buzzing with adrenaline, every passing shadow a potential ambush. But no one followed me. No headlights stayed in my mirrors longer than a minute. I didn't stop driving until I reached the bright, ugly safety of a chain motel just off the main exit in town. Fluorescent lights, sticky carpet, humming ice machine. No cameras in the room, no host who knew my exact movements. When the clerk slid the keycard across the counter, I'd never been so grateful for a mass-produced plastic card in my life. In my room, I locked the deadbolt, set the security latch, checked the bathroom, checked behind the curtain, and then finally sat down on the edge of the bed. My hands had started shaking again, now that I was off the road and no longer in survival mode. Took a breath, pulled out my phone, opened Airbnb, and went back to Eric's listing. Then I hit report this listing and started typing. 2 days later, back in Phoenix, I was sitting at my desk finishing up a case report when an email from Airbnb slid into my inbox. Thanks for your report. It began in that sanitized corporate tone. We take guest safety very seriously. Our team is reviewing the listing and host activity. We may reach out for more information. I'd written a detailed report that night in the motel. Undisclosed cameras, isolated location, unannounced visit, recorded messages. I'd included photos of the domes, screenshots of Eric's replies, the exact wording of his no need to meet in person note. I'd kept it professional, factual. Years of police documentation had trained me for that. What I really wanted to write was, "You have no idea how close you are to a headline." I called the non-emergency line for the sheriff's office that covered that stretch of Utah highway. Explained who I was, what had happened, what I'd seen. The deputy on the phone sounded skeptical at first. Disclosed cameras in common areas fall into a gray zone in a lot of jurisdictions. But when I mentioned the unannounced late-night visit, the timing, the isolated property, his tone changed. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We've had some things out that way before. You did the right thing leaving. If you can email your statement and photos, we'll attach it to our file and send someone to check the place out." I wrote another report, sent everything, the photos, the message logs, even my route and timestamps, in case they wanted to cross-reference traffic cameras or cell tower pings. Old habits again. Build the case, even if you're not the one who'll prosecute it. A week passed. The Airbnb listing for Highway Oasis, private desert house, easy access I-70 quietly disappeared. No email from Airbnb saying, "We've removed this host." No banner about policy violations. Just a dead link where the listing used to be. I wasn't surprised. I'd read enough investigative pieces to know how this usually goes. At best, they deactivate the host, maybe issue a vague statement about community standards. At worst, they quietly help them reappear under a slightly different name, in a slightly different town. Because supply is money, and money doesn't like friction. The deputy from Utah called me once more. "We went out there," he said. "Guy wasn't home the first time. Second time he was. He claims everything's legal. Says cameras are off unless there's a problem." We documented it, took some photos, requested a consent search. He declined. "Warrant?" I asked. "Judge, didn't think we had enough yet," he said, and I could hear the frustration under his dry voice. No clear evidence he's doing anything beyond creepy. Creepy isn't a felony. He paused, but we've got eyes on that address now. If anything happens out there, if anyone reports a missing person with that as their last stop, it's not going to start from zero. I thanked him, even though it didn't feel like enough. For a while after that, I tried to go back to normal work. I showed up to roll calls, read briefs, testified in court. But every time I drove past a cheap roadside motel or saw an ad for cozy stays on my phone, that house in the desert came back. The domes on the ceiling, the crunch of gravel, The way Eric's voice changed when he realized I wasn't an easy mark. I found myself scrolling Reddit threads late at night, stories from travelers who'd found hidden cameras in smoke detectors, in chargers, in fake vents. Articles about the dark side of home sharing, lawsuits quietly settled under NDAs, airy PR statements about isolated incidents in a community of millions. It wasn't new. It wasn't rare. It was just easy to ignore until you walked into one of those rooms yourself. I kept wondering about the people who'd stayed there before me. All those solo travelers passing between Denver and Vegas or Colorado and California who thought a quiet house off the highway sounded safer than a sketchy motel parking lot. People who didn't have training or a badge or a gun. People who might have opened the door when Eric knocked, smiling, thanking him for dropping by. I thought about how many times he'd stood on that porch before, listening for footsteps. Inside, deciding whether to push the knob and help with the stuck lock. Whether to step just a little farther in, maybe he never had. Maybe he really was just a control freak host with boundary issues and a love of surveillance. Maybe I showed up on the one night he decided to test how far he could go, or maybe I was the first one to say no. That idea bothers me more than I like to admit. Don't use Airbnb anymore. Not for myself, not for witnesses, not for family. When younger officers in the squad room talk about cheap stays for road trips, I don't preach, I just tell them one story: a quiet house, 3 cameras on the ceiling, and a host who happened to be in the area at night with a truck and a practiced smile. Most of them laugh it off. Come on, Sarge, that stuff's rare. Yeah, that's what we say about serial offenders too. Rare, statistical outliers. But the thing I've learned, the thing that keeping me up lately, is this: predators love systems that run on trust. They love platforms nobody fully understands, where the default assumption is, if the reviews are good, it must be safe. They love places in between cities, between jurisdictions, between home and wherever you're going. Highways, rest stops, short-term rentals. Somewhere out there tonight, someone is scrolling through listings on their phone. They're tired. They're on a long drive. They see a highway oasis-type place. Cheap, convenient, 5 stars. Host respects your privacy. They don't read the fine print. They don't zoom in on the ceiling corners in the photos. They just hit book now and keep going. They'll pull off the interstate into the dark, following a frontage road the GPS barely recognizes. They'll see a single porch light glowing in the middle of nowhere and think, finally, somewhere quiet to crash. And if they look up, once they're inside, they might notice a little black dome on the wall, or they might not. Either way, if someone like Eric is still out there, and there's no reason to think he's the only one, then the cameras are already on. The feeds are already live. The files already have new folders waiting for tonight's date. And somewhere in a dark room lit only by a laptop screen, someone is watching a stranger put their bag down, sit on the couch, and start to relax in a place they think is theirs for the night. Got lucky. I saw it. I left. I had a badge to lean on when the knocking started. Most people don't. And that's what keeps me awake when the house is quiet and the highway outside my window sounds just a little too far away, knowing that the next guest has no idea they've just checked into somebody else's idea of entertainment. Story 3. I've been a traveling ICU nurse for 8 years, bouncing between hospitals from New York to Seattle, working night shifts that turn your sense of time into mush. After a while, you start to think you've seen the worst of people: the fights in ER, waiting rooms, overdose reversals that don't take, families screaming at each other in hallways. I honestly believe nothing outside a hospital could really scare me anymore. That belief died the weekend I took a too-good-to-be-true Airbnb in Texas just to save a couple $100. It was last summer, between contracts. I'd just finished a brutal 13-week assignment in Phoenix, back-to-back nights, short-staffed, constant codes, and I was driving to my next contract in Houston. Human Resources booked my first week in a corporate hotel near the hospital, but I had 3 days to get there, and I didn't want to chew up my own money on expensive rooms along the way. So, I did what every travel nurse does now. I opened Airbnb, about an hour east of El Paso somewhere. In that vast nowhere between cities, I started looking for a place to crash for one night. Cheap, safe, off the highway. Nothing fancy. I was tired, wired on gas station coffee, and sick of the inside of my car. One listing jumped out at me like a neon sign. Private room, safe family home near I-10, female travelers welcome, $32 night. $32. With tons of 5-star reviews. The photo showed a modest single-story house in a quiet subdivision, concrete driveway, trimmed lawn, a minivan parked out front. Inside, the private room looked clean and simple, full-size bed, small desk, neutral decor, no clutter, no chaos. The host's name was Lena, 47, mom of 2, teacher. Her profile picture was warm and disarming. Shoulder-length hair, big smile, standing in what looked like a school hallway. Her bio read, "Love hosting nurses, students, and solo women travelers. I know what it's like to be on the road alone and just need a safe, quiet place to rest. I'm usually home in the evenings. Respectful house rules. My teenage son may be home sometimes, but he keeps to himself." The reviews were exactly what you'd expect to see if you were tired and a little naive. Stayed here on my way to San Antonio. Lena is an angel. Felt super safe traveling alone. Room was spotless. As a nurse on assignment, I appreciated the quiet and the early coffee. I scrolled and scrolled, looking for anything off. One 3-star review in the middle said room smaller than expected, but that was it. No weirdness, no drama. I told myself I'd seen enough. $32 was insane, but if she was just supplementing her income renting out a spare room, it made sense. And the idea of staying with a teacher mom in a residential street felt, in that moment, safer than some half-abandoned roadside motel. I booked it. Instant confirmation. Check in anytime after 6 p.m. By the time the sun started to go down, the landscape had shifted from open desert to flat, scrubby fields broken up by low clusters of houses. The directions took me off I-10, down a service road, and then into a subdivision that could have been anywhere in America. Same beige stucco homes, same cul-de-sacs, same half-dead trees and tiny front yards. I drove slowly, reading house numbers off mailboxes. Kids' bikes lay on a lawn 2 streets over. A dog barked somewhere. It felt normal, boring, exactly what I wanted. Lena's house was near the end of a quiet street, single-story, tan, with a small front porch and a porch light already on. A silver minivan in the driveway, just like the listing photos. The curtains were drawn across the front windows, but a warm glow leaked out around the edges. I pulled up to the curb instead of the driveway, old habit, easy escape route, and checked the message thread. "Hi, Emily. Code for the lockbox is 0923. Room is on the right, door will be open. I might be at the store when you arrive, so just let yourself in and make yourself at home." It was 7:40 p.m. The sky was that deepening indigo you get in summer just after sunset. Warm air, faint smell of cut grass, distant hum of the highway. A lone streetlight buzzed near the corner. I grabbed my backpack and small duffel, walked up the short path, and found the lockbox hanging discreetly beside the doorframe. Code worked. Key inside. I'd stayed in enough shared Airbnbs not to feel weird about letting myself in. Still, as I turned the key and pushed the door open, something in my chest tightened, just a little. That same subtle tightening I get right before we push a gurney into a room where we know the odds are bad. The entryway light was on. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something heavier, maybe last night's dinner. The living room was small but tidy. A brown couch, a coffee table stacked with magazines, a TV on a low stand. Family pictures lined one wall, kids in school portraits, a younger Lena with what looked like a husband, a couple of Christmas photos. "Hello?" I called out. "Lena?" Silent sigh. Listened for the sounds of a house, the clink of dishes, footsteps, a TV murmuring from another room. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the air conditioning. "Okay," I whispered under my breath. She said she might be out. Down the hallway to the right, a door stood slightly ajar. A laminated paper was taped to it. Guest room. A small smiley face drawn in marker. I pushed it open with my foot and flipped the light on. The room was exactly like the photos. Full bed with a plain gray comforter, small white desk under the window, a basic rolling chair. A narrow closet with a bifold door. No decorations except a generic beach canvas above the bed. A towel and a small travel-size shampoo sat neatly folded on the foot of the bed. On the desk was a printed sheet of house rules and Wi-Fi info held down by a ceramic mug. dropped my backpack on the chair, my duffel at the foot of the bed, and went to read the rules. They were normal. No smoking or vaping indoors. Quiet hours 10 p.m., 7 a.m. Please keep bathroom tidy for next guest. Wi-Fi. Lena guest. Password. Stay rested. At the bottom, in delicate cursive, someone had written, "Glad you're here. Text if you need anything. L." I exhaled slowly, some of the tension unwinding. It had been a long drive, and my paranoia had been fed by too many night shifts and too many stories. This was just a nice woman renting out a spare room. I texted the number she'd given me. "Hi Lena, it's Emily. I just arrived. Thanks for letting me stay." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "So, glad you made it. I'm at Walmart grabbing a few things, back in 20 to 30. Let me know if you're hungry. I made extra pasta." I smiled despite myself. My stomach growled on cue. Last real meal I'd had was hours ago. "Pasta. Sounds amazing," I typed back. "I'll probably shower and crash early. Long drive." "Of course," came the reply. "Bathroom is first door on the left. Make yourself comfortable. You're safe here." That last line made me pause. "You're safe here," I read it twice. It's the kind of thing well-meaning people say without thinking. But coming into a stranger's empty house, standing in a small, too quiet room, with drawn blinds and a neatly made bed, it felt a little too on the nose. I shook it off. My nerves had been living at a 10 for months. I was overdue for rest. I locked the guest room door, not because I thought I was in danger yet, just because. I always lock unfamiliar doors, and headed to the bathroom with a change of clothes. It was small, clean, a few pink towels hanging on the rack. Feminine touches everywhere. Floral soap dispenser, little jar of cotton pads, hot. Water hit my shoulders, and for the first time that day, I let myself really relax. The hum of the fan drowned out the highway in my head. I took my time, shampooed twice, scrubbed the road off my skin. When I came out, hair damp, body loose from the heat, the house felt different. Subtly, but different. The living room lamp was on now, casting a warm pool of light across the couch. A new pair of shoes sat neatly by the door that hadn't been there before. Men's running shoes, size large. I froze. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. From somewhere toward the back of the house, a woman's voice floated up. "Hey, it's just me. Don't worry, Lena." Same voice from the messages. Bright, friendly, harmless on the surface, she appeared. A second later, rounding the corner from what I guessed was the kitchen. She looked exactly like her picture. Mid-40s, light brown hair pulled back. In a low ponytail, soft features, yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt, she smiled like we were old friends. "You must be Emily," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Long drive from Arizona, huh?" "Yeah," I said, my heartbeat slowly easing. "You must be Lena. Thanks again for all this." "Of course, nurses are my favorite guests," she said. "You all work so hard. It's the least I can do. There's pasta on the stove if you want some. I'm just finishing up my son's laundry." She said it casually, like she lived in a sitcom, but my eyes had already flicked to the hallway behind her, where a half-open door revealed a shadowy room, a pile of clothes on the floor, a glowing strip of LED light. "Your son's home?" I asked, as neutrally as I could. "Not yet," she said. "He's out with friends, high school, you know. He'll probably sneak in late and think I don't know." She laughed. I smiled back politely. We did the small talk dance, where I was from originally. Ohio, how long I'd been traveling, what hospitals were like during COVID. She listened with that over-focused intensity of someone who didn't get a lot of adult conversation. I felt a little guilty. "It's so nice having women here," she said at one point. "I stopped renting to men unless they're with a partner. Some of them made me uncomfortable." I believed her. I've seen enough creepy men in hospital corridors to fill a book. We ate a quick bowl of pasta together at the tiny kitchen table. It was fine, slightly overcooked, heavy on jarred sauce, but I was grateful for something hot. "Bathroom, okay?" she asked casually, twirling her fork. "Yeah," I said. "Everything's great. Really. Good, she said. "Water pressure can be weird if we're running laundry. I always tell guests to shower before 10. That should have been background noise, ordinary house stuff, but something in the way she said guests, plural, practiced, made the hairs on my arms lift. "How Many people do you host? I asked. Oh, all kinds, she said. Nurses, grad students, women driving cross-country, sometimes just for a night, sometimes for a few weeks. Depends on their situation. She took another bite, then added, people tell me I'm a good listener. It sounded like a compliment she repeated to herself a lot. After we finished, I helped her rinse the dishes out of habit. She protested a little, then gave in. As I set a plate in the drying rack, I saw the photo stuck to the fridge with a magnet, a candid shot of a younger woman at the same table, laughing at something out of frame. Former guest? I asked. She glanced over, just for a fraction of a second too long. Yeah, she said. She stayed a while. We got close. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Told myself it was none of my business. People pass through each other's lives all the time. I'd had roommates I'd never see again. By 9:30, I begged off, blaming the road and early clinic orientation the next day. Of course, she said, get some sleep, lock your door if it makes you feel better. The way she said that made it sound like she already knew I would back in the guest room. I closed the door and turned the lock slowly, listening to the faint click. I set my backpack against the wall, my duffel beside the bed, and plugged my phone in at the desk. Only then did I really look at the room again, not as a tired traveler, but as someone who'd spent years reading bad endings and incident reports. The window above the desk had blinds pulled fully, shut, but the slats near the bottom were slightly bent, like someone had parted them a lot. The vent above the closet door had a newer, cleaner cover than the others in the hallway, bright white against slightly yellowed plastic, and up in the far corner of the ceiling, blending into the off-white paint, was a tiny, round circle, no, bigger than a nickel, dead center where two walls met. It might have been nothing. A patch, a nail cover. Except it was aimed perfectly at the bed. I stared up at that little circle until my neck started to ache. It wasn't marked, it wasn't obvious, but it was exactly where I would have put a pinhole camera if I'd wanted a full view of the bed. My brain did what it always does when something feels wrong. It started making excuses for the thing I didn't want to believe. Old screw hole, paint bubble, some weird builder quirk. Dragged the desk chair under it anyway. Standing on the chair, I could see it closer, a perfectly round plastic dot, slightly recessed, with the faintest hint of something darker in the very center. I'd seen enough nanny cams disguised as smoke detectors and alarm sensors to recognize the design language. Cheap, disposable, made to be ignored. My pulse ticked up a notch. Climbed down, moved the chair back, and sat on the edge of the bed. The room felt smaller now, the silence heavier. Imagine the view from that corner, strangers lying where I was sitting, changing, clothes, sleeping, thinking they were alone in some nice lady's house. I pulled out my phone and, without turning on the flashlight, flicked to the front camera. I angled it up and zoomed until the little circle filled the frame. A tiny, almost imperceptible glint reflected back from the center. Glass-eyed took a photo. My mouth had gone dry. I checked the listing again. No mention of cameras anywhere. No security devices on property box checked. Nothing in the text. If this was just for safety, why hide it? And why point it at the bed instead of the door or window? Faint knock at the guest room door made me jump so hard I almost dropped the phone. Emily? Lena's voice was softer now, muffled through the wood. You doing okay in there? I swallowed, heart hammering against my ribs. Yeah, I called back, trying to make my voice casual, just exhausted. Was about to crash. There was a pause. Good, she said. If you get cold, extra blanket is in the closet, and if you can't sleep, sometimes a cup of tea helps. I'll probably be up for a while. Her footsteps retreated down the hall, slow and unhurried. I waited until the house was quiet again, then crossed to the closet. The bifold door opened with a dry, plasticky groan. Inside, on the floor, was a woven basket with an extra blanket folded neatly inside. 2 extra pillows sat on the shelf, nothing else except the smell. Under the generic detergent scent of the linens, there was a faint, sour note. Sweat, maybe. A stale, lived-in odor that didn't match the crispness of the blanket. Crouched down and, on impulse I can't fully explain, tipped the basket slightly to look underneath. That scratches. Thin, clustered scuff marks on the inside walls of the basket, near the top edge. tiny arcs over and over, like something had been dragged against it repeatedly. Or like fingers had scraped there, trying to push the lid up. My skin prickled. I let the basket fall back into place and stepped out of the closet, closing the door gently. In the mirror, above the small dresser, my own face looked different, eyes wide, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. Not just road-tired, alert in a way I knew I wouldn't be able to shut off now. My phone buzzed on the desk, a text from an unknown number, but I recognized the last 4 digits from Lena's profile. Just checking in on you. Do you want that tea? Chamomile is good for nerves. Nerves, I typed back, fingers moving on autopilot. I'm okay, thanks. Think I'm going to pass out as soon as my head hits the pillow. Long day. The dots appeared almost at once. Totally. Understand. You're safe here, I promise. Sleep as late as you need. I won't bother you in the morning. Every time she said it, you're safe here, it rang a little more false. Real safety doesn't have to announce itself. Locked my phone, set it face down, and sat in the dark for a minute, listening. The central air hummed faintly. Somewhere, a refrigerator compressor kicked on. A car passed in the distance, tires soft on asphalt. Then, from the wall to my right, the wall that bordered what I assumed was Lena's son's room, I heard a sound I knew far, too well, a muted, irregular thumping, like something bumping against drywall from the other side. Not music. Not a TV. Not the rhythm of footsteps. More like the solid, dull weight of a shoulder hitting the wall, then sliding, once, twice, a pause, then again. My throat tightened. I stood and moved closer to the wall, bare feet silent on the carpet, and leaned my ear lightly against it. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then, in the thin space between our rooms, I heard it. Very low, almost lost under the air conditioning, a voice, not Lena's, not a teenage boy laughing at some video game, a hoarse, strained whisper, just one syllable, repeated, like someone saying hey without enough air behind it, 3 times. Then, silence. I jerked back from the wall like it had burned me. Nurses are trained to doubt our own perceptions when we're exhausted, to run through checklists. Hallucinations? No. Hypnagogia? Not yet. External source? Possibly. I stared at the wall, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. It was too late to pretend I was just being jumpy. There was the hidden camera, the scratches under the blanket basket, the overfamiliar texts, the shoes by the front door that didn't match any of the photos on the fridge. And now, a voice in the next room that did not sound like anyone staying with friends. I had a choice to make. I could lie down, lock the door, and hope I made it to morning without someone testing the knob. Hope that whatever was happening on the other side of that wall had nothing to do with me. Or I could leave quietly right now without an explanation and trust my instincts over courtesy. I'd seen too many patients arrive in my ICU because they'd overridden an instinct in favor of politeness. I moved quickly, forcing myself to stay methodical even as adrenaline surged. Phone, charger, wallet, keys. I slid my sneakers on without bothering to retie them, just shoving my feet in and crushing the heels down. I grabbed my duffel, swung my backpack over one shoulder, and eased the guest room door open just wide enough to peer into the hall. The house was dim, only the light over the stove in the kitchen was on now, casting a low yellow glow down the hallway. The living room was a pool of shadow, no sound of movement, no TV. Lena's bedroom door, farther down the left side, was closed. The door I assumed was her son's room, opposite mine, was also closed. No light under either. I stepped out into the hallway, wincing as the floorboard under my heel creaked more than I liked. I froze, listening. Nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard it almost hurt. I started moving, each step placed carefully on the parts of the floor that seemed quieter. It felt like walking through a ward at 3 a.m., trying not to wake anyone, except here there were no nurses' stations, no security cameras I trusted, no crash cart at the end of the hall. At the corner, I risked a glance into the living room. Empty. Couch, coffee table, TV dark, front door straight ahead, porch lights still on outside, faint yellow leaking around the edges of the blinds. I made it to the entryway and reached for the deadbolt. It slid back with a metallic clack that sounded. In that moment, like a gunshot, Behind me from the hallway, a soft voice said my name. Emily? I turned, hands still on the lock. Lena stood in the hallway in an oversized t-shirt, bare feet, hair down. No mascara now, no bright hostess smile. Her face looked flatter, heavier. In one hand she held her phone, screen glowing. "You're leaving?" she asked. I forced a neutral expression onto my face. Couldn't sleep, I said. I think I'm just going to push through and drive a little closer to Houston. Early start. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. Her eyes flicked to the duffel on my shoulder, the backpack strap cutting across my chest, the keys in my hand. "It's almost midnight," she said. "The highway is dangerous this time of night. Lots of drunk drivers. You're safer here." There it was again. "You're safer here." On the wall behind her, I noticed something new, a small square device plugged into an outlet near the floor. It hadn't registered earlier when the house felt normal. Now in the half-light, I saw the faint, steady blink of a blue LED Wi-Fi extender or a hub for something else. Swallowed. "I appreciate that," I said, keeping my voice as level as I could. "But I've done a lot of night drives. I'll take my chances. I just sleep better in my own rhythm." For a moment, the house held its breath with us. Then Lena smiled. Not the wide hostess smile from before. Smaller, thinner, if that's what you want, she said. "I just worry about my guests. People don't always make good choices when they're tired." "I know," I said quietly. "Trust me. I see that at work all the time." Her eyes searched mine for something. Fear, uncertainty, a crack she could slide. A word into. Whatever she saw made her smile flicker, just a fraction. "Text me when you get where you're going," she said finally. "So I know you're safe." "Sure," I lied. I opened the door. Warm night air hit my face, bringing with it the distant sound of the highway and the chirp of insects. As I stepped out, Lena added, almost lightly, "Next time you stay here, you'll know the house already. It'll feel easier. Next time." I didn't answer. I closed the door gently behind me and walked straight to my car, every nerve on fire, half expecting the door to yank open again. For her to call my name in a different tone, for another figure to appear in the dark beside the house. Nothing happened. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced once in the mirror. The house sat there, small and unremarkable, porch light still glowing, curtains closed. Tight. If you drove past without knowing, you'd never think twice about it. Didn't stop until I hit a gas station near a cluster of chain hotels by the highway. Under the harsh canopy lights, I finally let myself breathe. I booked a last-minute room from my phone, 12 times more expensive than Lena's house. The total made my stomach twist, but I didn't care. Up in the anonymous beige safety of the motel room, I locked the deadbolt, set the flimsy latch, and sat on the bed staring at my phone. My last text thread glowed on. The screen, Lena's cheerful check-ins, her soft reassurances. "You're safe here." My thumb hovered over the Airbnb app icon, opened it, scrolled to my upcoming trip, and tapped on the listing. The photos looked exactly the same, bright, friendly, harmless. I scrolled all the way to the bottom to report this place. For a long time, I just stared at the button. Reporting meant conflict. It meant being the difficult guest. It meant maybe being wrong. But it also meant that if I was right and something was happening in that house that wasn't just cheap hospitality, I wouldn't be the last set of eyes to notice. I hit the button and started to type. 3 days after I filed the report, an email from Airbnb appeared. In my inbox while I was on a lunch break in the Houston ICU break room, half asleep over bad coffee. "Thanks for letting us know about your experience," it said. "Guest safety is our top priority. We've escalated your report to our specialized safety team. They may contact you for more information. In the meantime, we've paused this listing while we review." Paused, not removed, not banned. Paused. I'd read enough about how these stories go to know what that usually meant. Hidden cameras, guest complaints, quiet internal investigations, settlements. Airbnb's own policies now say no indoor cameras are allowed anywhere inside a listing. No living rooms, no hallways, nothing. Hidden devices are strictly prohibited, and violations can get a listing taken down or a host removed. On paper, It all sounded reassuring. In practice, it usually comes down to who complains, how loud, and whether anyone is looking. That evening, during a lull between admits, I stepped into the empty family consultation room and called the non-emergency line for the local sheriff's office near Lena's town. I explained what I'd seen: the pinhole camera above the bed, the scratches under the blanket basket, the voice through the wall, the middle of the night pressure to stay. The deputy listened longer than I expected. When I mentioned that Airbnb had paused the listing but not, as far as I knew, alerted law enforcement themselves, he made a low sound that wasn't quite a curse but carried the same weight. "We've started getting more of these calls," he said. "Short-term rentals with security devices that just happen to point at beds. Sometimes there's enough to move on. Sometimes there isn't. Did you get photos?" "Yes," I said. "Of the ceiling, the guest room, the basket, her messages." "Email everything," he said. "We'll document it and see if we can get consent to look at the property. If she refuses, maybe a judge will see it differently. If there's a pattern." A pattern. After the call, I went back to work. I titrated drips, checked vent settings, joked with a scared teenager before we rolled him to CT. The familiar rhythms grounded me. But every time I stepped into a dark room, some part of me flashed back to that ceiling corner and the faint, hoarse voice through the wall. A week later, another email from Airbnb: "We've completed our review. The listing you reported has been removed from our platform for violating our safety and security device policies. Thank you for helping keep our community safe." No details, no admission, no word on Lena, just a tidied up corporate bow on something that still felt messy and unfinished in my head. Out of morbid curiosity, I tried opening the listing link from my trip history. "This listing is no longer available," the screen said, as if it had evaporated, house and all. But the house was still there, the street was still there, the neighbors were still there, and so, most likely, was Lena. On a day off, I called the sheriff's office again. The same deputy picked up. "We went by," he said. She was friendly. Said the device in the ceiling was an old smoke detector, couldn't show us any wiring. When we asked to take it down and look at it, she declined without a warrant. Claimed you were an over-anxious guest who imagined things. We documented it. Right now, that's about all we can do. Did she have other guests?" I asked. He hesitated. "There were cars in the driveway," he said. "But that's not a crime, not a crime." I hung up and sat there staring at the wall, blood roaring in my ears louder than any monitor alarm. I'd spent my career stabilizing people whose bad luck or bad choices dropped them into our ICU, car wrecks, bar fights, overdoses, freak accidents. I always believed that the world was dangerous, but mostly random. You tried to make good choices, drive sober, pick better friends, and hope it never chose you. But this was different. This was calculated. A woman who handpicked a niche: female travelers, nurses, students, people conditioned to override discomfort, to be polite in strangers' homes, to second-guess their own instincts. She built her entire listing around the words safe. Safe family home, safe female host, safe neighborhood. You're safe here. And if that camera was what I knew it was, then safety was the product she was selling to us and taking from us at the same time. Some nights, after a hard shift, I'll scroll through new housing options and catch myself flinching at any listing that says perfect for solo women or nurses welcome. Those are the ones that should feel comforting. Instead, I imagine someone on the other side of the screen thinking, "That's my favorite kind." I never heard what happened to the voice in the room next to mine. Maybe it was nothing, some pipe groaning, some half-dreamed sound my exhausted brain turned into a person. Maybe the scratches under the blanket basket came from something else entirely. But I keep picturing that photo on Lena's fridge. The young woman laughing at something just out of frame. The way Lena's eyes lingered on it a beat too long. I wonder how many guests stayed there and brushed off the odd feeling, telling themselves not to be dramatic. I wonder how many never realized there was a dark eye in the corner above them, recording everything, feeding someone's private archive. Airbnb will tell you they've tightened their rules now. No indoor cameras, even in living rooms. Hidden devices prohibited, listings removed, hosts banned. On paper, it looks clean. Out in the real world, it's messier. Listings vanish, hosts move to other platforms, cameras get smaller, disguises get better, Predators don't retire because a policy changed. They adapt. I got lucky. I was tired, but not so tired that I ignored my own training. I saw the lens. I heard the voice. I left. I had the time and stubbornness to report it, to follow up, to be the annoying guest who wouldn't. Just move on. Most people will just leave a vaguely worded 3-star review. Something felt off. Wouldn't stay again. And the next night, someone else will book the same house on a different app with the same photos and a slightly different host name. They'll be grateful for the low price, the safe family home, the warm text that says, "You're safe here." They'll bring in their small bag, lock the guest room door, and tell themselves they're overthinking it as they look around the room. Maybe they'll notice the tiny dot in the corner. Maybe they won't either. If someone like Lena is still operating, and everything in my gut tells me women like her Dawn, to stop because one nurse got spooked and left, then the red recording light is already on. The files already have folders with tomorrow's date. And somewhere in a tidy little house on a quiet Texas street, a stranger is lying down in a borrowed bed, unaware that their long hard day is about to become someone else's favorite video. Story 4. I've been driving commercial routes for 19 years. 18-wheelers, cross-country hauls, the kind of work that teaches you to read people fast and trust your gut, because your gut is often the only thing between you and a very bad situation. Truck stops at 3 a.m., rest areas where you park knowing you're alone, and vulnerable little towns you've never seen before and will never see again. I thought I'd learned every angle of how people prey on people in the spaces between cities. I thought I was immune to being caught off guard. I was wrong. It happened last April, somewhere in rural North Carolina, at a place that looked safe enough on my phone screen but felt like a trap the moment I walked through the door. I'd been on the road for 11 days straight, Atlanta to Pittsburgh to Chicago, standard routes, decent pay. My back was screaming, my eyes were gritty, and my knees felt like they were held together with rust and prayer. A hotel would have set me back $70 a night, and the truck stop mattresses in my rig were no better than concrete. So when I saw the Airbnb listing, I almost didn't click on it. The title was simple: private, room, mountain getaway, quiet retreat, $45 night. The location was near a small town called Asheville, close enough to I-40 that I could sleep and still make my next pickup without burning daylight. The photos showed a long farmhouse-style building set back from the road, surrounded by trees, with a separate entrance leading to what looked like a converted guest cottage or annex. Clean, bright, nobody else visible in the pictures. The host was Marcus, 54, retired military, local host since 2019. His profile picture showed a thick-necked man with a buzz cut and a jaw like concrete. His bio read, hosting truckers, business travelers, and folks needing a real rest. I get it. You work hard. You deserve peace and quiet. My place delivers that. No judgment, no questions, just clean beds and reliable Wi-Fi. The reviews were exactly what I was looking for. Great stop between runs. Host is a real veteran, understands the lifestyle. Cheapest, reliable room in the area. Highly recommend. One trucker specifically wrote, "This guy gets us." Not like hotels where they eyeball you for wearing dirty jeans. I was sold. I booked 2 nights. Instant confirmation. Marcus's message came through seconds later. "Welcome. Check in anytime. Back door to your room is keyed entry. Code 7483. Privacy guaranteed. No interaction required. There's coffee and snacks in your room fridge. Enjoy your rest. Privacy guaranteed." Those words should have meant something different to me by then, but they didn't. I took the exit off. I-40 around 7 p.m. when the sun was already melting orange behind the ridge lines. The service road cut through dense forest, oaks and pines pressed in tight on. Both sides, the kind of nowhere that makes your headlights feel like the only thing keeping the dark at bay. The property appeared suddenly, a mailbox, marked with fading numbers, a gravel drive leading back through the trees. My headlights swept across the main house first, a big farmhouse maybe, 1950s, with a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Lights were on inside, soft and yellow. A pickup truck sat in the driveway, mud-splashed and utilitarian. Behind and to the right of the main house, set back maybe 50 yards, was a smaller structure, a cottage, detached, with its own separate driveway. Single-story, metal roof, a small porch with a light over the door. The photos had shown this angle. but seeing it in person was different. Isolated, quiet. Exactly as promised. I pulled my rig around to the side, parked it where it wouldn't block anything, and grabbed my personal bag. Just an overnight duffel, change of clothes, toiletries, laptop. When you live in a truck, you travel light. The cottage door was around back, just like the listing said. I punched in the code. The door clicked open. Inside was exactly what the photos had promised. A small bedroom with a queen bed, a kitchenette, with a mini fridge and a 2-burner stove, a narrow bathroom, and a small living area with a couch and a flat-screen TV. Everything was clean, Spartan, but clean. The air smelled faintly of bleach and something else, maybe air freshener or maybe just the smell of a place that had been empty for a while. The mini fridge hummed quietly. I opened it and found exactly what Marcus had promised, a plastic container of instant coffee, a carton of juice, some packaged snacks. A laminated card sat on the kitchen counter with house rules printed on it, standard stuff. Quiet hours after 10 p.m. Use Wi-Fi password Marcus Guest 2019. Lock the door when you leave. Dispose of trash properly. At the bottom, in handwriting, someone had written, "Rest easy. You're secure here." I set my bag down on the bed and did what I'd learned to do in 19 years of sleeping in strange places. I checked everything. Bathroom window, locked and painted shut. Bedroom window, same. The door had a standard key lock and a deadbolt. Nothing fancy, but solid. I sat on the edge of the bed for a minute, listening. The hum of the mini fridge. The faint sound of wind in the trees outside. A dog barking somewhere distant, toward the main house maybe. I felt a knot in my shoulders start to loosen. This was fine. This was exactly what I needed. I showered, changed into clean clothes, and tried the Wi-Fi. It connected fine. I texted my dispatcher that I'd be offline until morning, checked my messages, nothing urgent, and settled onto the couch with a can of Coke from the fridge to watch the news. Around 9 p.m., I heard a vehicle pull into the main driveway of the property. An engine cut off, a car door slammed, voices, male, casual, saying goodnight to each other. Then another truck rumbled past my cottage, heading deeper into the property somewhere. Guests. Probably. Or maybe Marcus had other business. It didn't concern me. Dozed off around 10, TV murmuring softly. Woke up at 2:47 a.m. I know because I checked the clock on. The microwave, a habit from years of interrupted truck stop sleep. Something had pulled me out of a dream I immediately forgot. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the night outside was still, no branches scraping, no rain. Then I heard it again, a soft, deliberate tap against the window above the kitchenette sink. Not branch. Not an animal. A finger, knuckle against glass. I was fully awake in an instant, that animal alert part of my brain screaming. I stayed on the couch, didn't move, didn't make a sound. My eyes found the window. The blind was closed, but there was a gap at the top where I could see out a few inches into the darkness. Nothing visible, just black. The tapping came again. 3 deliberate taps, spaced out. Tap, tap, tap. Like someone was testing whether I'd respond. My heart started moving faster. I reached over and killed the TV. The sudden silence made everything louder. The hum of the fridge, the wind, my own breathing. Then a voice, muffled through the glass but close. "Hey, you awake in there?" Male. Voice, older, vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Didn't answer. "I saw your light on," the voice continued. "Wanted to make sure everything's working okay. Sometimes the water heater acts up." Marcus. Of course it was Marcus, my host. Probably normal, probably fine. Checking on his property like any responsible host would, except it was 2:47 in the morning, and normal hosts don't wake people up to ask about water heaters. Everything's fine, I called back, not moving from the couch. Was just heading to bed. "Oh, I didn't mean to wake you," he said, and I heard something in his tone. That I didn't like. An artificial casualness, like a line he'd rehearsed. "Just doing a property check. You need anything?" "No," I said. "I'm good." "Great, great," he said. The shadow moved. I could see the shape of him against the window, just a darker blot against the black. "Get some rest. Big day tomorrow probably, yeah?" How did he know I'd have a big day tomorrow? Was that just an assumption, or had he been looking at something? My truck, registration, my dashboard, something about me I'd left visible. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Thanks." I heard his footsteps move away from the window. I didn't relax until I heard an engine start somewhere deeper on the property and the sound of a vehicle driving away, tires crunching gravel. For a long time after that, I sat in the dark living room and didn't move. My mind was doing that thing it does when something feels wrong, but isn't obviously threatening yet, running through scenarios, cataloging details, looking for the pattern that would make sense of it all. The listing photos, the detached cottage, the privacy guaranteed, the isolated location, the host who just happened to be awake at 2:47 a.m. to do a property check, the water heater story that didn't require him to tap on the window to tell me. He wanted me to know he was close. He wanted me to know he could reach the window. He wanted me to know he was watching. I pulled the blind down lower, even though it was already down. I checked the door deadbolt 3 times. I moved a chair against it, not to stop someone from coming in, but to hear them if they tried. Then I got my phone, navigated to the Airbnb app, and started looking at Marcus's listing more carefully. The photos of the cottage were taken from angles that never showed outside views. No wide shots of the property, no context for where the cottage sat relative to the main house or the road. I scrolled through the reviews again, this time reading between the lines. Cheapest. Reliable room in the area. Why was the price a feature if the quality was also fine? Host is a real veteran, understands the lifestyle. Understanding the lifestyle, meaning understanding that truckers work irregular hours, sleep odd times, might not notice if something was off. Great. Stop between runs, stop, not destination, stop, like a rest point, like a place to pause but not to stay. One review, buried 5 pages in, from a user. Named Truthseeker47 was 3 stars. Place was fine but felt weird. Host kept checking on me, tried to befriend me when I wanted to be alone. Wouldn't recommend for solo travelers seeking privacy. That review had been deleted and reposted 3 times. I could see the dates. Delete, repost, delete again. Like Marcus kept removing it, but the reviewer kept adding it back. My hand started shaking a little. I opened Google Maps and zoomed in on the property address. The satellite image was about 2 years old, but I could see the layout, the main house, the cottage, and then, further back, several other structures. Maybe sheds, maybe something else. Hard to tell from above. I did a search for the property address directly. Marcus's place, Asheville, NC. A Facebook result popped up, an old post from a local newsfeed about a missing person investigation near Asheville about 4 years ago. The article was brief. A woman from nearby had been reported missing after booking a short-term rental. Last known location was near this area. Investigation ongoing, no name in the snippet. I tried to click through the full article, but the link was dead. I searched for Marcus's name plus Airbnb plus police and got nothing. Just his listing, a bunch of 5-star reviews, and a profile that looked clean as a whistle. But that missing person report. The deleted review, the 2:47 a.m. window tap from someone claiming to check on a water heater. I got up and moved to the window, careful not to open the blind too wide. I looked out into the darkness. The cottage was dark around me, but the main house was still lit. Soft light in one window, a kitchen maybe. I could see the silhouette of someone moving past the glass, then past again. Pacing. Was he pacing because he just checked on me and decided I was interesting? Or was he always like this at 3 a.m.? I pulled out my phone and took a screenshot of Marcus's profile picture, his bio, the property photos. I opened a note and wrote down the time he'd tapped on the window, what he'd said, the exact tone of his voice. Then I did something that probably wasn't smart, but I was past the point of being cautious. I called the non-emergency line for the local sheriff's office. The dispatcher who answered sounded tired. "What's your emergency?" "Not an emergency exactly," I said quietly, "but I'm renting a property through Airbnb, and the host just woke me up at 2:47 a.m., tapping on my window. Said he was checking on something, but it felt wrong. I'm wondering if there's any history with this address." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear keyboard clicks. "Address?" the dispatcher asked. I gave it to her. More keyboard clicks, a longer pause. "You okay right now?" she asked. Different tone, more alert. "Yeah," I said. "I'm locked inside, but I don't feel comfortable staying the night." "Don't," she said immediately. "Leave right now. Go to the main road and wait for a unit. I'm sending someone." My stomach did a flip. "What is it?" I asked. "Is there something?" "Just get off the property," she said. "Now, leave a light on if you can, keep your phone on, and drive toward town. I'm dispatching a deputy." She hung up. For maybe 2 seconds, I just sat there, phone in hand, heart hammering. Then I moved. Grabbed my duffel, swept my stuff off the counter into it, and headed for the door. I paused just long enough to unlock the deadbolt and check the main lock to make sure I could open it quickly. The night outside was thick and black, the kind of black you only get far away from any city lights. I could hear the wind now, and something else, the sound of an engine starting, somewhere on the property. I moved fast but quietly, heading toward my truck. The gravel crunched under my feet louder than I would have liked. Behind me, a flashlight beam swept across the property, and I heard Marcus's voice calling out, "Hey! Where you going?" I didn't answer. I got to my truck, threw my bag in the cab, and got the engine running. The headlights blazed to life, sweeping across the property. In that light, I saw him, Marcus, standing about 30 yards away, in the yard between the cottage and the main house. He was wearing jeans and a heavy coat, and in his right hand he was holding something that caught the light, metal, solid, maybe a tire iron or a wrench. Our eyes met for just a second across that space. Then I threw the truck into gear and headed for the road. Behind me, Marcus didn't move. He just stood there, watching me leave, the thing in his hand hanging at his side. I didn't slow down until I'd put 5 miles between myself and that property. A sheriff's cruiser passed me going the other direction, lights off but moving fast. Right around the time I hit the main road, I pulled into a 24-hour diner and parked under the brightest light in the lot. Hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the coffee cup the waitress brought me. The coffee didn't help my hands stop shaking, but it gave me something to anchor myself with. The fluorescent light, the clatter of dishes, the low murmur of truckers talking about loads and weather, it all felt like another planet compared to the dark quiet of that cottage. About 20 minutes after I sat down, my phone rang. Unknown local number. "This is Daniel," I answered. "Mr. Hayes, this is Deputy Collins with the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. You called about an Airbnb out near Old Ridge Road?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm at a diner off exit 37, under the sign that says Best Pie in the County, if that helps." He gave a small huff that might have been a laugh. "Stay put there," he said. "I've got a unit at the property now. You alone?" "Yes." "Good. I'm going to ask you a few questions over the phone. Then I'd like you to come down to the station when you can. You're not in trouble. We just need your statement." He asked me to walk through everything from the beginning, booking the place, Marcus's profile, the reviews, the way the property was laid out, the 2:47 a.m. window tap, the water heater excuse, the thing in his hand when I drove off. Kept my answers calm, factual, the way I'd learned to be with state troopers after accidents. No dramatics, just details. When I finished, there was a pause. "You did the right thing leaving," Collins said. "And you did the right thing calling." "You sound like you've seen this before," I said. He sighed. "Not this exact thing," he said, "but we've had a couple of suspicious situations tied to that address. Nothing we could make stick in court. Complaints that didn't go anywhere. People who decided not to file formal reports because nothing actually happened. Missing persons?" I asked. "Can't discuss ongoing investigations," he said automatically. Then he added more quietly, "But I will tell you this, you're not the first person to get a bad feeling out there." The next day, after grabbing 3 hours of uneasy sleep at a motel off the highway, I drove to the sheriff's office. The building was brick, squat, no nonsense. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and paper. Deputy Collins met me in a small interview room with cinder block walls painted a tired beige. He was mid-30s, sturdy, with the posture of someone who'd been in uniforms most of his adult life. He slid a form across the table. "Before we get into it, sign here," he said. "Standard witness statement." I signed, then walked him through everything again, this time with my phone on the table, photos open. Marcus's listing, his profile picture, the laminated "Rest Easy. You're secure here" card, the screenshot of the missing person article I'd found, even though the link was dead. Collins took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. "You ever see anyone else on the property besides Marcus?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I heard another vehicle come and go around 9. and I saw a silhouette in the main house window when I looked out later. Could have been anyone. Did Marcus ever enter your unit while you were there? Not that I'm aware of, but if I'd stayed asleep, I might be telling you a different story. He nodded. Here's the thing, he said after a while, leaning back. We've had 2 prior calls about short-term rentals on that property. One from a woman who felt like she was being watched, said the host kept checking on her at odd hours. One from a neighbor who thought there was too much traffic late at night. Nothing that rose to the level of probable cause. No clear-cut crime. Just a pattern that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. What? About the missing person case? I asked. The one from a few years back? His jaw tightened. That's not officially tied to this address, he said carefully. Last known whereabouts were nearby. Lots of rentals, lots of back roads. Hard to narrow down. But when you mentioned it on the phone, that's why I told you to get off the property. Because you didn't want me to be the next open file. He didn't answer that directly. We got out there last night pretty quick after you left, he said instead. Marcus was in his main house. Claims he was asleep until he heard your truck start. Says he tapped on your window earlier in the evening, not at 2:47. Says you're exaggerating. You checked the cottage? I asked. We did a walkthrough, he said. Nothing illegal in plain sight. It's clean. No cameras we could see without taking things apart. We asked to look in the back buildings. He declined without a warrant. That's his right. For now, I repeated. Look, he said. Short of you finding a hidden camera or catching him on video entering your place, without consent or someone actually getting hurt out there, we're boxed in. We can write reports, we can document patterns, we can lean on Airbnb to take him off their platform, but we can't arrest a guy for giving people the creeps. I rubbed a hand over my face. So, he gets to keep renting to tired travelers looking for a cheap bed. Maybe. Not, he said. We've had some luck pressuring platforms when we stack enough complaints. They like avoiding headlines. We've already sent a notice to Airbnb that we've had multiple safety concerns at that address. Between your report and ours, there's a decent chance they'll suspend or remove his listing. Or he spins up a new one under a different name, I said. Collins didn't argue. People, like him, he said, they use whatever tools the world gives them. Used to be classified ads, then Craigslist. Now it's apps and platforms. The tools change. The behavior doesn't. I left the station with a copy of my statement and a feeling that was worse than fear, frustration. The kind you get in the ICU when you know exactly what a patient needs and you can't get it because some policy or shortage blocks the way. 2 weeks later, back on the road, I checked Marcus's listing out of morbid curiosity. It was gone. The link now led to a generic page. This listing is no longer available. I half expected an email from Airbnb thanking me for keeping the community safe, but none came. For them, it was just one less property in a sea of millions. But I couldn't stop thinking about that cottage, about the Rest Easy card, about the way Marcus had said privacy guaranteed, like a promise and a threat, about the missing person article that wouldn't load anymore. Years of driving have taught me how to spot patterns on the highway, a certain rhythm to traffic before an accident, the way brake lights ripple before a slowdown, the twitchy weaving of a drunk driver. You learn to read the road and the people on it now. I was starting to see patterns off the road too. To isolated property, detached unit, cheap rate, host with a background that makes guests drop their guard, retired military, teacher mom, nurse friendly. Lots of 5-star reviews, 1 or 2 weird ones buried deep or repeated with slightly different wording. Late night check-ins where nobody else is around to see who comes and goes. Platforms love those listings. They fill gaps where hotels don't exist. They make money while pretending to be neutral. But those in-between spaces, between highways, and towns, between home and destination, are perfect for people who don't want to be seen. Started changing my own habits. Stopped booking anything I couldn't verify across multiple sources, satellite, images, street view, sometimes even county property records. I avoided detached units on rural land unless they were attached to a working business, a farm stay with public presence, a guest house, attached to a real, visible operation. When younger drivers asked me for tips on saving money on the road, I told them the story straight. Not to scare them away from every rental, but to make them take their own instincts seriously. Cheap and quiet isn't always a blessing, I'd say. Sometimes it's a strategy. Late one night, weeks later, I was fueling up at a truck stop in Tennessee when I saw an ad on my phone for a perfect trucker's retreat. Private cabin near I-40, veteran host, $39 night. The photo showed a small building, detached, surrounded by trees. For a split second, my tired brain thought how nice it would be to have 4 walls and a real bed again. Then I noticed the wording. Privacy guaranteed, no interaction needed. You'll feel safe here. I closed the app. As I climbed back into my cab, I glanced across the lot. A younger driver, maybe mid-20s, was scrolling on his phone as he walked, duffel over his shoulder. I wondered what he was booking, what promises it was making. Here's the thing most people don't understand about the road. Danger doesn't always look like a dark alley or a bad neighborhood. Sometimes it looks like a cozy listing with 5 stars and a friendly host who understands your lifestyle. Sometimes it looks like a cheap room at the edge of a forest where the nearest neighbor is far enough away not to hear you if you scream. I got lucky. I woke up. I listened to the part of me that had seen too many bad endings. I had a dispatcher who took me seriously and a deputy who moved fast enough that Marcus didn't get a chance to improvise. A lot of people in my position would have rolled over, told themselves they were overreacting, and tried to sleep. They would have stayed because it was late, because they were tired, because it felt rude to leave. And predators like Marcus count on that. Somewhere tonight, someone like me is pulling off an interstate into the dark, following GPS directions down a narrow road, turning into a driveway at a place that looks just like Marcus's on their phone screen. They'll see a porch light, read a laminated Rest Easy card, and tell themselves they're being paranoid. When the host knocks just a little too late to be polite, maybe they'll leave, maybe they won't either. Way, if men like Marcus are still out there, and every instinct I have says they are, then the trap doesn't need a specific address or a particular platform to exist. It just needs someone tired enough, alone enough, and trusting enough to walk into it. People think the scariest part of my job is the wrecks on the highway. It's not. The quiet places just off the exit where no one is watching who goes in and who never comes back out.